Welcome everyone to Thursday, February 27th. My name is Alex Volkov and I'm an AI evangelist with weights and biases. I apologize in advance. I've gotten a little bit of cold after all my travels, but supposedly it sounds okay, so hopefully we'll get through this. I'm all medicated up. This week was incredible, specifically because there's an update from a company that we've been waiting for a while to give us an update, which is Anthropic. We're definitely going to cover Anthropic 3.7. For those of you who have no idea what I'm talking about, enjoy the ride because this is likely the best coding model or generally one of the best models in the world that we got this week. We've also just now gotten some breaking news. The news is going to break very soon, around 8:30 my time or 7:30 in the morning. OpenAI's main account posted, "See you in the live stream at 4.5 hours," which absolutely means the GPT-4.5 is going to get released. Hey folks, Alex here from the editing floor. OpenAI did end up releasing GPT-4.5 an hour after our recording, and so we had another emergency recording afterwards. So you may hear us talking and speculating whether or not it's going to release, but I will include a section from that other recording as a summary of what OpenAI released with GPT-4.5, which is by far their biggest model. Now with that, there's also a bunch of other news. There is Grok launched voice mode. Let me actually do a TLDR. I'll just tell you about everything that we're going to talk about this stream. I will also shout out the fact that today we're going to have an interview with Windsurf. How many of you actually used Windsurf? So I went to AI Engineer Summit this past week, and in there we met with folks from Windsurf, with Kevin specifically. And I got to say that I was very interested in what's going on with Windsurf. And then Kevin said he's going to come and tell us all about it. So stick around for the second part of the show where Kevin Hou from Windsurf is going to join and talk to us about how they got an insane amount of traction in the past just few months. And they're getting more and more. And at least on my feeds, this absolutely changes the narrative. I see people like dropping Cursor and moving to Windsurf. For those of you for whom this makes no sense, Windsurf and Cursor are both like IDE editors. They're cloned VS Code, and Windsurf just the upcoming one, but they used to be called Codeim before, and so they just rebranded with a new IDE, but they've been doing this for a while. Welcome, my co-host here, Nistan, what's up?
Hey, what's up, everybody?
Hey man, let's do a quick recap. We have around 100 or so folks already listening, and probably going to have a lot more because today is a great release day. How you been? Have you tried Windsurf? We both said we should try Windsurf before Kevin comes. Have you? I haven't.
I downloaded it.
Awesome.
I watched the whole video with them.
So we'll tap into the community here. Folks, if you have any questions for Kevin from Windsurf, feel free to drop them. We're going to chat with Kevin. I pretty much have a great idea of what to ask, and I've seen Kevin's talk on AI Engineer. Like, we're going to talk about coding and vibe coding and etc. But if you have any questions specifically for Windsurf, I would love for you to just drop them and tell us. All right, folks. So I think that it's time for us to get started. Okay, thank you, folks, for commenting. All right, I think it's time for the TLDR. Folks, for those of you who are joining for the first time, Thursday is getting recorded live, and we start with the TLDR because there's a lot for us to talk about. If you live in the middle, you can know everything we're going to talk about. For those who don't know, this is going to end up as a podcast on every major podcast platform, wherever you get your podcasts. Thursday, give us a review, and also a newsletter with all the links. So if you fear of missing anything, please have no FOMO. Just follow Thursday.news and you'll have everything. With this, let's start with the TLDR. Right. So let's start with open source. This week, actually yesterday was very interesting. Did you see Microsoft released 5? I think it called it 4 multimodal.
Yeah, the 5 models can be hit or miss. Like they can seem pretty bad at first and then do pretty great in benchmarks. But yeah, this is a new model, and I'm still reserving judgment until I tried it. But it looks ideal for a portable size that you can run on the phone, and it's multimodal. And it's MIT licensed.
So we'll get to talk about this once we get to open source, but super quick. I saw one release from Together. They called it Minions, which is they're pairing local models like Ollama with the cloud models for speed up. It's very interesting, worth checking and talk about, because we'll always talk about edge models and on-device models, but this is like combining both. It's very interesting. Then DeepSeek, our friends at DeepSeek, went on an open source spree and dropped tons of open source. Everything is very advanced, like Flash MLA and Deep Gem and Deep EP. And I think the highest one is parallelism strategies, specifically dual pipe. So worth checking, talking about this. This is part of the reason why DeepSeek succeeded. They released kind of some of the secret sauce behind this. So we'll run through this. I don't think we're going to do a deep dive into DeepSeek's open source, but they released like a bunch of stuff that they attributed in the paper, the success for their models and training. Then yesterday, Microsoft released 5.4 multimodal and 5.4 mini, which is 3.8 billion parameters. 5.4 multimodal, and when I say 5 for folks who are just listening, it's PHI, 5.4 multimodal. This model processes text, image, and audio inputs and generates text outputs, 128 token context length. It beats Whisper on transcription. This is crazy to me. Obviously, Whisper is a much smaller model. So as Technium called out, Whisper is a significantly smaller model. But this is an LLM. This is an LLM that beats Whisper in its own game with a 4.6.1 word error rate. It does recognition. Very impressive. It does translation. It's very impressive for a small model, because it's not a specialized model. Whisper 3 is specialized, and so we're going to cover Phi a little bit as well, because Nistin I agree with you, with the vibes on Phi. They're always split. Then in open source, we got two new things this week that I was very excited about. We started to see diffusion-based LLMs, and we got two of them in the same week. So first of all, Inception Labs launched Mercury Coder, which is a diffusion-based LLM. They said it's the first one. And then almost immediately after, LADA, LLADA, 8 billion parameter, also released a diffusion-based LLM, and also says that they improve on top of Llama-based, etc. LLMs. Diffusion is mostly used for image and video generation. It's very interesting. They actually visualize, and it's worth looking at. They actually visualize how kind of blocks of text appear, and we're going to talk about the benefits as well.
Yeah, this is a complete breakthrough. It just hasn't quite hit yet that this just happened, because people thought for a while it should be possible, because then you can do multiple token prediction at once. But we can talk more about it. I actually spent a few hours on it yesterday, looking through all the papers, trying out the Inception one, looking at what its weaknesses were. So I can cover that.
We'll dive into this. So this is it on the open source LLMs, but there's a tons of other open source that was released in voice and audio, or I guess in vision. Alibaba open sourced 1X, which is the video model behind what you saw in Quen's interface. I've been talking about this for a while, but they finally open sourced this one. It's a text to video and image to video state-of-the-art model. So this is likely the best video model that we currently have. So shout out to Alibaba 1X team. They actually have a new handle. This is another team I'm suing, and they just like collaborate. It's been up for a while, so they have a full service, but now they also have they released the weights for these models, and you can run them. There's also some audio stuff from Baichuan. Baichuan is also a Chinese company. They released the Baichuan Audio Unified Framework for end-to-end speech interaction, which is also super, super cool. So this would be everything on the open source. Listen, anything else I missed? Folks in the audience, also feel free to tell me if I missed any like big open source stuff.
No, that's mainly I just wanted to cover the diffusion
models.
Diffusion language models that are here before 4.5 drops.
Yeah,
and then everyone forgets about it.
That's true. In the area of big companies and LLMs, like we're moving forward, we're still in the TLDR area of big companies. So obviously, OpenAI is about to launch GPT-4.5. We've seen screenshots of the app that shows that pro users will get 4.5. We know from previously Sam Altman's releasing the roadmap for OpenAI that is going to be a unified model. Likely, this is what O3 is, and then we're going to get some sort of like a unified model. The big news this week, and we're going to cover this a lot, is Anthropic released Claude 3.7 and reasoning. This model we've talked about on the space already. For those of you who are joining because of this space, welcome. We've covered this model ad nauseum at this point, but not on Thursday. This is the best coding model around. It beats previous Claude 3.5. The vibes on this are immaculate. We're going to cover them as well. OpenAI also Launch deep research to Plus members and EDU members. Folks, if you haven't tried deep research because you didn't want to pay $200, now is your chance. Try it. It's incredible. You get a limited amount, but it's worth for everything that you're trying to purchase, etc. It's so good. Definitely worth it. Also in big companies' APIs, we're going to cover this. Alexa Plus is about to launch the next generation of Alexa powered by Claude and Nova and some other AIs. You'd be able to talk to Alexa, and she's not going to be, let's face it, she's probably going to be stupid anyway, but she's not going to be as stupid as previously because you'd be able to talk to her like you talk to an LLM, like you talk to with voice mode. And so Alexa should be able to connect some dots for you and do some things, although I'm skeptical about some of the stuff the marketing showed us. But all right, we'll talk about this. And then Grok 3 goes free. When we talked about Grok 3 last week, after that, they released Grok 3 for free for everyone because they screwed up a little bit. And for many people, they showed Grok 2 instead of Grok 3. Not only this, they also launched voice mode, including Unhinged 18 plus voice mode, which we will definitely play on the show because this is just something that only XAI could launch. No other big labs can launch something as Unhinged. And call it Unhinged in the app. It's really called Unhinged. I don't know if you saw. So the conversations with this was just like remarkable.
I just got it today before the show. They finally enabled it, so I haven't tried it. Oh, there is one more thing that we missed in the open source world, and that is Magma 8B from Microsoft. This is huge, and it looks like something is gonna like change people's lives.
Oh, really?
It's a multimodal agent. But what that means is that it's been trained for robotic tasks. So not only can it do vision in LLM, it can do vision in LLM for calling actions and specifically calling robotic actions. This to me looks like the robotics. And I want to hype it a little bit because, again, it is also MIT licensed. I think, no, it's Apache 2.0 licensed, if I'm correct. It's MIT Magma 8B on Microsoft on Hugging Face for people who want to check it out.
Definitely let's add this as well. Folks, there's so much news that it's impossible for us to catch everything, but with the community and everything, we're going to get it close. We're still in the TLDR, so I want to just finish up. I'm going to add Magma 8B as well. I think this is it in big companies and APIs, like GPT-4.5 and Claude 3.7. I think that's enough on its own. Grok voice mode is also here, and Alexa Plus. Google also launched AI Co-Scientist, which is pretty dope, but we can skip it. In this week's Buzz, an area where I talk about weights and biases, we're going to cover the agents course that's coming up and also do, hopefully, a recap of AI Engineer. And vision and video. Let's finish up the TLDR. I want to talk about open source. In vision and video, VO2 from Google is finally available via API, via FAL, and only text to video is available right now, but image to video is going to be also available. VO2 is likely the state-of-the-art video model that's coming from Google. It's probably the best one. I also covered already Alibaba Open Source 1X, which is the state-of-the-art for open source video models, but VO2 is definitely up there. And it's the most expensive one. Better than Sora, but significantly better than Sora. Octave released Hume, the company released Octave, which is their first language model built for TTS, for text-to-speech. This is an LLM that you can ask it to generate voices and talk like a human. It understands what you ask. It understands the prompts and actually responds with emotions. It's pretty cool. And you can also prompt voices. You can say, I want a voice that's raspy. I want a voice that sounds like Alex, with a mix of an Israeli and Eastern European Ukrainian accent that is sick, and it will generate something. Also, 11 Labs introduces Scribe. Folks, state-of-the-art ASR model beating Whisper 3, beating other ones, and does diarization. Woo, this is so cool. So shout out to 11 Labs. I wish they released this as open source. Obviously they didn't. It's in their API, but they're also planning. They're bidding Gemini 2.0 Flash. They're bidding Whisper Large with 85% of user preferences. They have audio event tags. When we laugh, when we pause, when we sneeze, when we do all these things, this model understands the audio, has 97% accuracy in English with 3% word error rate. It has world level timestamps built in and speaker diarization. This is so cool. This is absolutely so cool. So definitely we'll want to try it out. And the last thing that we have to cover is Cloud Code. Together with the 3.7 release, Anthropic released a CLI library, like a command interface library that we've tried, all of us, and it's very much dope. You go into any folder, you type Claude, it opens up a thing, and this thing understands your code. It can create files, it can run things that you change. Super cool. We're actually going to show this. This is it.
I think they should call it Cloud Cash because it just burns money as you
Yes,
use it. You
absolutely.
literally, we saw people use like $18 in the hour that we had the space up, and someone went up to 30 by the end of the space, just burning tokens. Some people have put it on their company thing, and I saw LDJNR, who wrote the Shrek sampler. He had put four of them, and then he put one last one to actually pull together all the to do all the code pull requests. So he was running five of them all at once,
Yep.
and yeah.
One last thing from the community. Welcome, LDJ, by the way. One last thing from the community. Folks just commented that Live Code Bench, which is a benchmark for coding that we trust a lot, has a new leader, Kimi K1.6. And yeah, we definitely should mention this as well.
We got to cover Kimi. We have covered Kimi before.
Yeah.
But there is something in particular for the GRPO dataset that needs to be talked about.
All right, so let's talk about this,
So,
and let's start with open source. Open source AI, let's get it started. Let's get it started with open source, folks. We have tons of stuff to talk about, so let's jump into the main categories by covering the fairly quick things, super quick. Together's Minions is a attempt to use local open source models together with clouds for speed up. So they're basically using very interesting way to break down tasks and then offload those tasks locally to your multiple local LLMs that run on your machine. For example, remote GPT-4.5 can decide what your local minions, and they focus on the S. It's not minion, it's minions. The multiple models that are running in parallel on your machine, they're achieving incredible 87% of the accuracy of the production model with just 3.3% of the cost, because most of it runs locally. So most of the tokens generate locally. It's honestly pretty cool. Reading through the blog of Together, they have created multiple interesting things. This one just like another attempt to shove off some compute to small local LLMs. Specifically, they have issues with context length as well, but it's very worth checking out if you want to optimize kind of the stuff that runs locally. To me, this beats a little bit. This kind of removes the excitement about local models, because one of the reasons why we use them is fully complete offline use, and this kind of reduces this, and so the cost optimization here. But I think nonetheless, this is a cool approach that we want to highlight because we do love open models locally. But I think the two main things that we want to cover in open source is 5.4 multimodal and the diffusion models. Listen, let's start with diffusion models, because I think we had two this week, and it's definitely very interesting. Mercury Coder launched, and the highest kind of outcome of diffusion models is the speed with which it generates the text. On H100, they're getting 1,000 tokens per second, something we only saw from specialized chips for LLMs. This is on an H200, H100, getting 1,000 tokens per second on the H100. Listen, what is diffusion models and how is LLM related to this?
Yeah, this came as a bit of a shock yesterday, because people had been talking for a while that you should be able to use diffusion models with code and how to grow the code base when you generate it. That's not exactly right. And the fact that it worked, and the fact that it worked very well, was a bit shocking yesterday. I did try the model. It looks like it is a fairly small model. So they're comparing with Encoder 7B, which is a very good one. So it was actually pretty good. It only got like half of the very hard questions, but it was doing the hard question. And the speed was real. So the speed was not just average speed of batched stuff, but everyone that was using it was getting over 1,000 tokens per second. So it was fast, and it was just fine. Now, the reason that these models work well is they have paired the LLM with the diffusion model. And at first, we were debating as to how they would actually do that. But no, it looks like the LLM and the diffusion part are separate. And the way that they run is the LLM runs, and then it has some kind of masking mechanism and then it has a bidirectional inference, so it goes not just in one way but another. There's an LLM in there, and then a diffusion model in there, and it allows it to generate multiple tokens per second. This makes it very good at stuff like fill in the middle, because if you give it the outside of the code or so, it's very good at filling in the missing parts, because that's also how it has been trained. This also allows it to parallelize really well.
Yeah, and if you play with this on the chat interface of chat.inceptionlabs.ai, they actually have this toggle that's called diffusion effect. You can actually see this whole block come together, and they're not streaming token by token like autoregressive. They're actually like trying to generate like whole blocks.
Yeah, the streaming effect is fake there. I think the API is still returning.
Yeah, I think they call it like a diffusion effect for a reason, because I think they're being somewhat transparent. Like that's not actually how it looks. But if you turn it off, like you still see, if you try again, like regenerate, but with the diffusion effect off, you'll still see it does chunk by chunk. Like it almost looks like it's streaming, because you do get something at the beginning before the end.
Yeah.
Like you see a first chunk of text at first. If you were to like put it super slow-mo, it would be like a chunk and then another big chunk and so forth.
Right now, of course, the live demo effect is showing that it doesn't print me anything. But yeah, before the diffusion effect, you can do actually see streaming. But they are, like with diffusion, they're generating like all of these code blocks together, right? This is what makes it run much faster. Why haven't we seen diffusion models before? I wanna hear from you folks if we're actually getting excited by this, or is this like another novel thing that eventually will not end up? Because I'm assuming big labs already tried like most of these approaches.
Yeah, so there is papers in the past that like there is like a somewhat steady stream over time of more and more promising diffusion papers, even in open source and just on archive and stuff. And actually some of the authors around some of the most promising papers over the past year are people that worked on this company that ended up joining this company. Apple has something called Planner, which showed some promising results. That was 1 billion parameter scale that was competing with autoregressive GPT-2 scale models trained on similar token counts, and it shows lower hallucination rates, better self-error correction, and all that. But I think the question has for a long time been, how well does this scale, and is it like training compute effective from a training compute standpoint, and then inference compute as well? Can you make all those things like actually be efficient enough, even if it's as good quality for the same parameter count? It seems like here, at least what they're claiming, is they're able to, through their architecture, have a 2 times more parameter count while still being same cost and latency as a regular autoregressive model, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, and the speed obviously is very impressive. We're getting incredible speeds of unmatched in regular GPUs, right? We're only seeing the speeds from specialized hardware like LPUs from Grok and Cerebras, etc. 1,000 tokens per second is absolutely mind-blowing to get, especially in the coding interface. So in this interface, the folks who are listening were trying out, they actually have a sidebar with the HTML outputs, and then you can ask for the model to do something. It almost instantly appears, almost immediately. So that's super, super cool.
What's pretty amazing is it got very good results in Copilot Arena. It scores well above its weight in the Copilot Arena, because again, when you're using it in cursor or in code, you're always doing fill in the middle.
Yep.
So it scored very high on that. So its performance per weight, consider that very high. That's what I find. By itself, it's all right. It's not bad.
I wonder, because of this, the significant speed up in tokens and size, if this means a good thing for local models. And so let's talk about actually the second thing also in diffusion, which is we are not only seeing them release a new model, we're also seeing like an open source attempt as well. So we have Lada, which is Lada 8 billion parameter, also a diffusion LLM. It just released a paper and dropped a model as well. What do we think about Lada, folks?
Yeah, so like Aaron said here, it's trained on like around 5 times or 7 times less data, while already competing with Llama 3 8B with same parameter count, but trained on like 5-7 times less data. So that's like in itself is already pretty impressive. But then there's a question, even though it used 5 to 7 times less data during training, how much compute did that training actually cost though? Because for each token, it might have used much more compute during training. And so there's different factors like that to take into account. I'm not sure about the specifics for Lada and how that played out, but I think it was comparable or better flops for training as well, if I remember right. But there is like, when I actually tried it myself, there is these like robustness failures and a lot of like unreliabilities that could also just be due to their like poor post training or something.
Mm-hmm.
Could also just be bad fine tuning. But yeah, there's a Hugging Face demo that people could use for free if they want and see how it works for themselves.
All right,
Yeah,
folks. So
I agree.
Lisa.
Lada needs more training, but it looks like this might be pretty much the same thing. Yeah, earth-shattering breakthrough dropped, and it turns out someone's already open sourced it. Yeah, we're likely to see some models come out this way. Very likely to see more models come out this way. And yeah, there are quite a few questions into how long it takes to train and stuff. It might just not have been trained for that long. It's more of a demo, and the demo worked.
Yep. So, folks, diffusion models absolutely are going to be a very interesting improvement, or potentially, at least for speed, not to be ignored. So we'll keep mentioning whether or not the models that we get are like diffusion based or etc. I find it really funny that in the image world, where diffusion models predominantly work, they have started moving towards diffusion transformers. All right, let's talk about some other open source, folks. We have also, let's talk about, Nista, you wanted to cover Kimi. Let's talk about Kimi, because I don't think we've covered it fully. I'm not entirely sure like what Kimi is all about, but I saw that Kimi is like beating the live code bench, which is dope. Kimi we mentioned, but I think those are fine tunes of Kimi that are getting significant performance now, right?
Yeah, it looks like, correct me if I'm wrong, that Kimi is made from a few people that used to be at DeepSeek, or I'm not too sure.
I heard about that, but maybe it's true.
It looks like, so the method, the reinforcement learning method, which you can try it yourself on the Onslaught Colab notebook, is you take a regular benchmark that has A, B, C, D, and then you start to run through the questions. And the way you train reasoning into a model, you just ask it, just reason stuff out about this question and then come up with the answer. And whenever in the end it comes up with the right answer, you take that and you put that in the training data. You keep doing this over and over again. The thing about this is that you can just keep doing this. And they've kept doing this with a 1.5B model. It's essentially the model is improving itself this way, if people that like to sort of talk about that. But yeah, it's a 1.5B that they're scoring extremely high. And they haven't released the model. They've released an MOE, which is a 13B MOE with 2.6 active parameters. At larger scales, this method of doing reinforcement learning applies very well to code, because you can check if it got the right code answer, and then you can keep repeating that, and then it trains that into itself.
I feel bad for Kimi actually, because I think, if I remember right, the Kimi K 1.5 paper, I think I remember it came out like the same day or like the day after R1 came out. And so it got overshadowed by R1. But yeah, since day one, when I read the Kimi K 1.5 paper, I think it goes even more in depth into how they do reinforcement learning process and everything than the DeepSeek R1 paper does. And so a lot of people have been looking to what Kimi is doing for more insight into the next paradigm of RL. And the new model that's scoring, I forgot what leaderboard it is, but scoring like number one or second place in a big leaderboard now. That's their model fine-tuned for its International Olympiad for Informatics.
On Live Code Bench, IOI.
Yeah.
All right, folks. Mr. Magma, you wanted to mention Magma as well. Magma 8B. What's interesting to you about this model? This is Microsoft, right?
This is the model for robotics, and it's MIT license. It seems like it's similar to OmniParser. Like it's just a projection layer with a vision model and stuff that's a little bit better at video, but it looks like it can do function calling for these robotic tasks. So to me, it looks like an OmniParser 2, which is insanely good. If you're going to do anything in robotics, this is the model right now.
Yep, and they released it with like great fanfare, but I think it's
with MIT license. If you're doing a robotics company,
so Magma stands for so Microsoft Research,
yeah,
and they got to like number one Hacker News as well. GitHub.com/Microsoft/Magma released just a few days ago.
Do we know if there's any leaderboards or like scores on any agentic benchmarks or anything it has?
No, we tried to make a Skunkworks robotics arena last year, which is a bit ahead of its time. But yeah, if you pay attention to the figure model that they used for their humanoids, that was also a 7B. There's an 8B, so this kind of looks like that sweet spot over there, which you might have enough compute power.
Oh, is
with
that confirmed?
40.
Figure confirmed?
Oh, they show 7B on their site.
Oh, cool.
So yeah, if you're gonna make a humanoid or something, you're probably gonna get like a 4090 or a Mac Mini or something, and just shove it in there, and then use one of these and just hope for the best.
All right, folks, so this is Magma, and then we talked about Kimi. We pretty much covered all of the open source, at least in the LLM part. We also probably should mention in the open source as well, that Alibaba open source 1x, 1WAN, 1x. Apparently, when folks try to figure out, and I also tried to figure out what is this video model, they didn't use anybody else's. They created their own, they trained their own video model. It's called 1x. It now looks like getting to be, at least among the open source models like HY Video and others, this looks to be like the state-of-the-art video model. The logo is similar to Alibaba Qwen, but this is Alibaba 1, so they have their own kind of public team. 2.1 is the model. Next Evolution video generation, they say they topped the leaderboards for VBench leaderboard, outperforming some state-of-the-art. So they claim they outperform Sora at 84.2, they're getting 84.7. I actually don't see Vio on this benchmark because it feels to me that Vio is going to be a little bit better. But they're saying this new version of 1 tops this leaderboard. This leaderboard is preferential. It's the users deciding whether or not they prefer it. They released 2 sizes. They released 1.3 billion parameter lightweight and then 14 billion parameter with image to video capabilities. Very important. Video models come up and usually they are not necessarily image to video. They release a bunch of text to video, but for people who have played with video models, they want to do very specific things. Image to video is very important. So 1x is supporting image to video as well. For some folks in our timeline, because image to video with open source models with this quality definitely means a few things for the waifu community. 1x is up there in terms of using this for whatever image that you want and to animate that image with any type of physics. Have you guys seen some outputs? We can probably show some outputs.
I tried this. I can confirm it's true. The only downside is the generations are like 5 or 8 seconds. But yeah, it can be pretty.
Yeah, I think they generally care less about the censorship generally than the Western world. Maybe this is what kind of they're planning to, and because of image to video. Now, it still feels like very diffusion. Like you can see in this image of the wall dance, kind of the face of this woman after she rotates changes multiple times. It's still, the character consistency is not like incredible. And you can feel that the diffusion is not like everything smooth, etc. And the motion is not necessarily intact. So I don't know. Like in my gut feeling, this is a great model, but it doesn't pass like HY Video, for example, or Kling. Kling, I don't believe it was released fully open source. I don't remember if Kling was released open source or not, folks. But yeah, we have.
It has a style to it. I like it. That it is a bit motion blur, cartoonish and stuff, and that people can identify that it's that. But yeah.
Yeah, I think we can see some examples of like motion blur as well.
Basically, that last thing that Nissan just said, I agree. There's some sort of compression artifacting, I guess I would call it, and that effect of that motion blurry type of thing. It's really cool that this is open source, you said, right?
Yep. We have 1.5B and then 8B.
I think with diffusion models, it typically uses more VRAM per parameter than just a language model would. But even then, I think for the most part, somebody with a 4090 or especially a Mac could end up running this locally. Now we have this level of abilities on our computers.
Sorry, 1.3B and 14B. So 1.3B runs on a 4090 and gets 5 seconds of video, 40 pixels.
They just updated the Hugging Face yesterday. They have a 14B. It's WAN-AI on Hugging Face. Yeah, so they have 14B, 720p, 480p, and a 1.3B, which should be fun.
And honestly, if you guys look at the download sizes, the top model, 14B, 720p, got 30,000 downloads, and they just launched it 2 days ago.
480p got 200 and 222. Okay, that's got to be that model.
Look at this. It got almost 250,000 downloads, updated 1 day ago. This is crazy, folks. This is like when the waifu research department comes in and they want models. This is like almost 250,000 downloads since 2 days ago. This shows how much the community wanted some of these models. All right, so this is open source, folks. I think that this is most of it. We're going to cover our VO2. It's time for us to go to big companies and APIs and also acknowledge that we have Kevin here from Windsurf. Kevin joined us earlier. What's up, Kevin? Welcome.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you as well. We just saw each other last week in the Engineer, and you gave a talk there. Kevin, before we jump into a conversation with you, I asked you to come in earlier because like the first few things we're going to discuss makes sense to discuss with you as well. In the big companies and APIs, folks. Okay, as promised, here's the summary of our later chat about OpenAI's GPT-4.5. So I just wanted to try and sum up and kind of summarize everything we just got. So we joined OpenAI on their live stream, and we've got an announcement of GPT 4.5, which is not the frontier best model, but this is the largest, OpenAI's largest LLM, improving on GPT-4's computational efficiency by more than 10x. So they trained like a huge model and then released it. And they're going to release this first to pro tier members, which is $200 a month. And they also released it to everyone in the API, which is a very interesting choice for the staggering cost of $75 per 1 million input tokens and $150 per 1 million output tokens, which for comparison is more than 10x expensive on the output than GPT-4o. And I don't know, like 30x more expensive than on the input tokens. They have shown a bunch of evals compared only to themselves, not to other frontier labs, showing different things. I think the highlight of us was, Nistan was here before and talking about GPQA. GPQA is Google Proof, question and answer, like professor PhD levels. The jump there was very much incredible. From, I think, to 75. Let's see. Yeah, and then they also mentioned this like vibe benchmark as well. So on GPQA, they released an upgrade from 53% on GPT-4o to 71% for GPT 4.5. A jump in AIME math. Obviously, nothing close to the reasoning models because this is not a reasoning model. This is a pre-trained model that just like auto-regressively spits out tokens. But basically, 36% for AIME math versus 9 for GPT-4o, so this model can do math. Very interestingly, we talked about two software engineer benchmarks. So there's the SWE bench verified. The jump here from 4o is not that crazy, but there's also the SWE Lancer. There's a new benchmark that tries to solve real world from Upworks, and 4.5 got to a 32% on SWE Lancer Diamond, beating 4.0 at 23% and O3 Mini at 10% as well. Very high scores in MMLU Pro, multilingual, so 85% on those. So the benchmarks are good, but again, they mentioned that this model is not going to crush benchmarks on specifically math and code because that's the realm of reasoning models right now. And then we read Karpathy's tweet that has access to this model where he talks about basically it's really challenging to come up with examples where this model can be better than a reasoning model or other models, but it feels like better overall, more human overall, more instruction following overall across multiple paradigm. They have mentioned that next week they're going to launch this on the plus tier, so the $20 a month tier, and then following that, likely many other folks will get access as well. Anything else I missed in recap, LDJ, Tanishq, before we wrap up? All right. Then with this, thank you everyone for joining, listening to us ramble on and doing like a live stream together with OpenAI. It is always an exciting day where we get a new model, a new big model. This is a 0.5 release, so scaled for 10x the compute from the previous models. And we will hopefully get access to it in the UI, so we won't have to pay that many tokens. What stood out this week, obviously, was Anthropic launching Claude 3.7. And for the longest time, even though better models were releasing and reasoning was releasing, and all these models beat everything on competition code and math and code forces, etc., Claude 3.5 was still the workhorse for coding for many people. And with the release of 3.7, we jumped into space. We talked about this. I would love to recap our conversations and vibes about this. For me, Sonnet 3.7 got such an immediate agreement in vibes. It's rare to get this clarity of whether or not the model is good or not, this immediate, right? So like we saw the release, was that Monday, LDJ? I think it was Monday.
Yeah.
And immediate, everybody just jumped in. It just shows how much the community loves 3.7. Let me start with, maybe Kevin, let me start with you. I saw that Windsurf already added support for 3.7. Have you had the chance to play with it? What's your take on this new Flare update model?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. I think Anthropic has done some magic here. 3.7 is definitely advanced. It's cool to see it thinking. I feel like that was something that people it's like a step function in the way that you use a product, right? To feel that it's doing things behind the scenes and actually making that come to life through thinking is pretty cool. I think I'm like a bit on the fence because it's expensive both from like a tokens perspective and then specifically in the way that we use it at Windsurf. Like it calls a lot of tools or has a tendency to want to call a lot of tools. I think people have noticed this. It kind of yaps or it reaches for tool calls quite a bit. So yeah. I'm speaking about it specifically from building a product with 3.7, but then actually as a user of 3.7, it's been quite pleasant.
Yeah, the few stats that we can add to this is the first model that gets 70% on Sweetbench, which is state of the art. It's absolutely remarkable. Getting 70% on Sweetbench with some structure, I don't think they just did it one shot. It's still very impressive. 3.7 is, like Kevin, like you mentioned, is a reasoning model as well. So it's a combined model that like chooses to, you can add extended thinking to this model. They also have significant upgrade in the output tokens as well. Nistan, we've played with this model as it came out on the space, and then you kept playing with this. What's your take so far on the vibes collected from the community, but also like by yourself?
So we went a bit nuts on it, and everyone agreed on the first day. I do also want to cover again some of the criticisms that came out right now. I really like it in the main app, and I've noticed that even while using Bedrock on AWS, it doesn't feel the same. There are things that you can do there which are better, like setting up the temperature and system prompt, but it's still something feels different about the main app, as in better. The other thing is I tried it in bolt.new, so thanks for hooking me up with that free trial. I was just straight up vibing there. I was able to make a whole app. The one thing that I started noticing after some time, and I think this is why other people complain, is that because the context window is shorter, that does, once your code base gets to a certain size, that does reduce its ability to do stuff. And this is probably why other people are complaining that it started changing random files and is doing too many changes. It is a little bit eager to make changes. For me, that's a good thing in the main app because I'm going to write majority of the code myself. And I do need it to give me all the options and stuff. But when you use it in agentic mode, you need to have a lot of scaffolding like Bolt has. And yeah, so people notice that they're prompting strategies that worked on Claude Sonnet 3.5 don't work as well on Sonnet 3.7. Like it is a little bit eager to do stuff. Overall, it's a much smarter model.
Yep.
It'll just take a bit for people to adapt their prompting.
The thing
I was able to one shot entire apps in Bolt. I compared it with Grok. I compared it with other models. It's able to make much better diagrams.
The few things that I noticed, and you guys can chime in and say whether or not this is your experience as well, at least from the vibes and timeline, is that it looks like this model was trained on UI specifically. So a bunch of people are one-shotting landing pages fully, and nothing close to this used to happen before. Obviously, the type of AI influencer that says 10 wild examples, and some of these examples, you can use different models as well for this, but here's a very good straight up empiric tests. LM Arena has a web dev arena. Web dev arena is usually where folks are building things. I think they actually have a VS Code extension that generates two things, and you choose inside VS Code, like which one do you want. Claude 3.5 was the leading model back on this web dev arena, above the DeepSeek R1, above Grok 3, above O3 Mini, above all these models. So Claude 3.5, Claude Sonnet 3.5 was the leading one. And now Claude 3.7 is a significantly leading one. This means that people are actively choosing 3.7 responses. I have seen the criticism that you guys are referring to. I have seen folks saying, hey, I switched back to 3.5 because 3.7 gets lost a little bit or yaps too much or like thinks for too long. I have seen this. I wonder as well, is at least part of it is we're getting used to getting like thinking models. You need to prompt them a little differently. But also it could be the fact that like it like goes and calls too many things. To mention the cost, they also released Claude Coder, which we played around with. Claude Coder is a CLI tool that basically allows you to connect your Claude account. You have to be a paid account. You cannot just use this for free. And basically, it's very similar to Aider, I believe, right? Your CLI tool goes into a directory of your choice, and you generate this Claude.md file that basically understands what your repo is about. You can ask the CLI tool to do changes, to create files. It has all the access to all those things. It shows you, hey, I'm about to create this file, I'm about to do this, I'm about to commit. It has a pull request review mode, and then it has a hidden mode for stickers. So if you're using this, you can get some Claude stickers as well. That CLI tool has a /cost command, and it's really funny that they built it in. They also print out the cost at the end of every session. And I've seen folks getting, just initializing the repo, getting 13 cents just like by initializing repo. Compared to other models that we have, 13 cents on DeepSeek or 15 cents on DeepSeek can get you like 1 million tokens. Initializing the initial run with 13 cents is just like comparatively insane. Now, it's insane to us and we can play around with this. Kevin, you guys are actually building a product with this model. So like price is going very important there. But we'd love to hear your thoughts about them releasing like a coding thing in the CLI and how you think about this. And yeah, I thought it was super cool.
Yeah, I think it's awesome, and bummed because I got hit with the waitlist bit, so I haven't actually been able to try it.
Yeah. Oh, they got
But
to the waitlist already. Wow. Okay. So yeah, we
yeah,
talked about this. This was a limited edition thing. And back on the stream, if you guys remember this in LDJ, I told everybody, hey, go in there and go quick because like they got the waitlist.
I guess there's a couple dimensions that we can talk about here. One is the CLI form factor something that is helpful? And then two is more like, what does that mean for a lot of the application companies like us and Cursor and whatnot? I guess speaking on the first part, I thought the CLI, like this is on the better end of how CLIs have been executed for
Yep.
AI experiences. I'm generally fairly skeptical of purely terminal-based LLM tools, but it seems like they've done something good here. I will reserve judgment until I actually use it, but it's pretty cool and the quality seems quite good. And I think this is just overall agents have gotten much better and models have obviously gotten better. And so these things become more and more possible. Okay, they're entering into the application game. I think it's good for the ecosystem. It's certainly great for devs that everyone is rapidly improving for the end user. I think that there's a big difference between the terminal and an IDE. I think you'll probably reach into it for maybe two separate personas or perhaps two separate workflows. I think this sets them up very nicely for things like containerization or potentially things running in a more async form factor that is disconnected from an application layer, which is interesting. So I'm wondering what the angle there is and what the future of the tool is. From an immediate day one, all right, you now have a terminal and you now have a bunch of IDEs. I still think that the IDE is probably where people want to spend most of their time. But again, time will tell on shapes up. But yeah, most importantly, I just want to try it. I just want to use it. It seems really cool.
So folks from Topic who are listening to this, let Kevin access. We want to hear Kevin's thoughts about this. Nistan, LDJ, you guys get access to this or no? I see. Nistan?
I didn't use it because it scared me how much it was costing people. A person was saying that they let a job run on it overnight and they couldn't sleep because they might wake up homeless.
I definitely felt this. I launched, so in this repo that I'm showing to folks who are watching us, I ran this Python notebook that I have. And it just started showing me like execution time, and then it got to 900 seconds. And at the end, I had to cancel out, and nothing happened. And basically, the whole time I was watching this, I felt that just like my mind is getting wasted away. So I actually don't know about this form factor as well, because like the thinking part and the streaming part, you have no idea how much it's going to cost. So absolutely, I saw folks getting excited about this, but also getting scared of the cost. Whereas I saw that they prefer being locked into kind of like a product that they pay for, and the kind of the cost is getting offset by the product to 3.7. Speaking of which, I've seen the whole industry pivot on a dime and support 3.7. It was incredible. Kevin, you guys supported it like super quick. I reached out to our devs and at the Weights and Biases Weave to say, hey folks, we need to give the users the option to compare 3.5 to 3.7, for example. It was implemented in bold.new, and we gave the cheat code for folks to get a whole year of bold.new. We can maybe talk about this at the end. If you're interested in a whole year of free bold.new, stick around to the end. Maybe we'll do it in the end as well. So, folks, a few more updates on the big companies before we get to the interview with Kevin. Kevin, so thanks so much for joining us just a bit before. So, this is Claude 3.7. What else should we add there? I think we covered most of it, but basically the evals, they look really immaculate for 3.7, but we are seeing a little bit of a drawback from folks after they have used it on the price specifically. But definitely we got the top coding model, right?
People measured the context length. The maximum that they could add to Claude projects was 110,000 tokens for the thinking model and 140,000 tokens max for the regular Sonnet 3.7. So there is a reduction in there because on the last one, you could add up to 180, 190 or so, and then still be able to use it and review that code. So there is a reduction in context size.
One thing that I saw that they announced in the API that you'd be able to control precisely the thinking, which is unlike O3 where you get only the 3 levels. I haven't played with the thinking API yet, but definitely need to run it through its paces. But that is very exciting. And supposedly today, OpenAI is going to release their combined model as well. So we'll see how that goes. So very expensive, great new model from Anthropic. Shout out. We've been waiting for Anthropic to come back, and now we have, and it looks like everybody's trying out, and we'll see how the prompts also improve with this model. Moving forward to big companies, before we go to the interview with Kevin about Windsurf, the thing that got announced a second before the show today, GPT-4.5 is about to release today, folks. This is almost definite to this point. This morning at 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, the main account for OpenAI posted live stream in 4.5 hours. And just before this, we saw a release from folks like Tibor Blaho and some other folks where the app was updated, the iOS app, and in the assets, there was a screenshot that says limited access to 4.5. We also saw Sam Altman talk about the roadmap for OpenAI. In the roadmap, he said that O3 is not going to get released as its own model. It's going to get roped into 4.5. It's going to be a combined model. So like Claude 3.5, we're going to get a combined model for OpenAI. Hopefully today, we will have a release and not only just an announcement, blog, and some stats. We already had this back in the end of 2024, and we know O3 how good it is. In other big company news, OpenAI launches deep research to Plus members. Those of you who haven't tried deep research, to me, and I mentioned this multiple times, it's another ChatGPT moment. Deep research is this mode from ChatGPT that goes, visits websites, understands what's going on there, tries to understand your perspective. We actually had a deep conversation about deep research with Dr. Umantaz. Remember this was a great conversation as well. Deep research to me is another ChatGPT moment. Like everything that I now have a little bit more time for, research, something I buy, something where I go, for example, on travel. Deep research is absolutely like the number one thing I hit. I actually upgraded my ChatGPT to $200 specifically because of Operator I haven't used since then, but deep research you keep using every day. And now everybody in the Plus tier got deep research. Give it a try, folks. I've been waiting for it to hit the mass things, and then I haven't seen as much of a reaction to this release as I expected it to be, honestly. So it feels to me still under the radar. We're known here for Thursday Eye of telling you things about like below the radar before they blow up. So we've talked about DeepSeek a while before it blew up, and we've talked about like agents for a long time as well. Deep research is this. Now, the reason why they released it now for free or like for the Plus tier is because deep search from Grok is not nearly as close, but it works the same. So I've been using both. So Grok also released deep search, the example, but deep research still outputs these incredible essays of everything that you want, and definitely worth a shot now that it's in the Plus tier of GPT. Distant comments, LDJ?
Yep. I've shown it to people who are not necessarily in programming or developers or people that do other jobs. They're just completely blown away.
Yep.
I keep seeing that reaction over and over that, oh, I spent my whole life looking this stuff up and now this thing just did it. Yeah, nothing comes close to OpenAI's deep research. Yeah, their models are not as competitive stuff for code, but when it comes to deep research, that thing is legit.
They
It
cooked.
will like pull actual economics data. It'll pull actual stuff.
So one thing that deep research does well is that you guys know how we talk about a new model. There's evals, and those evals sometimes the company posts them and they don't include like Quen for something, or I don't know. Deep research is amazing at this. You give it a table of evals of Gemini 2.0, and you say, hey, get me the same stats for Quen, get me the same stats for this model. It will build you the actual evals table yourself with all the stats and will pull and will do an incredible job. Folks, one last thing in the big companies APIs that we have to mention. Two things before we jump in the interview. Alexa Plus. Amazon finally, we talked about this in September, October of last year, that they're about to launch something. They delayed it and delayed it. If you have an Alexa at home, you know how in the era of 2025, something like advanced voice mode from ChatGPT is incredible. Grok voice that we're going to cover in a second is incredible. You can talk to it, you can interrupt. And Alexa is still stupid. It's just like ridiculous. So finally, after a long time, after Amazon tried to develop their own models for it, after back and forth, like it's a huge company, Alexa Plus was announced with a bunch of videos, and it's going to have its own tier, but also come free for Prime members, I believe. Alexa Plus will include Claude. So this is part of the reason of their investment in Anthropic. Alexa Plus will be a LLM-based digital assistant that lives in your home. One of the first ones, I believe. I don't think that Google added Gemini yet. Siri is definitely dumb still. We're waiting for smarter Siri, and it's been a while, and it looks like it's going to take a while yet. It looks like the first smart assistant that's home-based is going to be Alexa Plus. It has all these integrations that they've talked about, and the very interesting thing is going to be powered by Claude with fallback on Nova, which we know that Claude is a great model. If Nova was any good, then it would be only Nova. They wouldn't have to use Claude, but they are using Claude. Very interesting and very telling that they decided this fallback. They also came out with a bunch of new SDKs, Alexa AI Action SDK, so you can connect your APIs and leverage the LLM-powered reasoning of Alexa. This is so cool. I'm like looking forward of a whole new crop of AI use cases for your home. I don't know if you folks built any Alexa experiences before. There's something to the embodied voice kind of conversation that is always listening. Even ChatGPT advanced voice mode, you have to turn it on. You have to open your iPhone, turn it on, etc., and wait. And also, it cannot do anything. Like it can go and search the web for you. There's no actions. Alexa is action based. And they're now adding an API for it to actually perform things in your home. So your home, your smart home, for example, is going to be connected directly to Alexa. I'm actually very excited. The more I talk about this, the more excited I get. I think this is going to be actually dope. So looking forward for that, and we'll definitely cover this once it works. It can call you an Uber, can update you if the Uber is coming. It can search through Ring or whatever. Alexa has like a bunch of video cam integrations. It can search through them and find the exact spots. So it's probably multimodal as well. It can find the exact spots on your recent video cam things of when something happened. So one example they showed is somebody asking, hey, did I let out the dog today? And Alexa's like searched through the Ring or whatever camera and said, yeah, the dog was actually like out a while ago. I don't know if it's a marketing thing or Alexa is going to be actually smart enough to do this. But generally, conceptually, that sounded super cool. Thoughts about this, folks, before we move on?
I've just been waiting for an Alexa upgrade for a long time.
Right?
I've stayed so true. Sometimes I'm sitting there and I'm like, turn off my lights or something. And man, these LLMs are so good. This is absurd that we're still living with this current tech.
Where we are at the edge of like building with intelligence and the fact that my home assistant sits and basically does timers for me.
It's crazy.
Hopefully, finally, Amazon decided to give us this. Look, I'm looking forward to this, but I'm also looking forward to the fact that like on X, the amount of stupid stuff that it will do is going to blow up. Everybody's going to have this viral moment of like, yeah, I said Alexa do this and then my house is on fire or whatever. So hopefully don't connect your smart toaster ovens to it yet and don't do this kind of stuff. But I think that with the SDKs that they've released, I think it's going to be actually like a boon for home assistants and getting to a point where it's not her, but it's more of an assistant in your house that can actually do stuff, turn off the lights, turn on the TV, play something, check about your like to-do schedule, etc. So the potential is insane. I'm looking forward for buying maybe a new Alexa device that will enable this. Last on our docket for big companies and APIs is similar to what we just talked about. Grok released voice mode, advanced voice mode from Grok in an unhinged way. made its way to the application. If you guys haven't heard how that is happening, we will now have a conversation with an unhinged voice. If you have kids listening to this right now, probably put on headphones, because they actually released an unhinged voice setting. Literally, you go in there and it says unhinged and 18 plus. Let's see. Hopefully, you guys will hear what this is going to be. Unhinged voice mode. It's going to swear a lot, I'm telling you ahead of time. Hey there.
Yo, Alex, how'd your day been so far?
Are you just cursing for the purpose of cursing?
Fair point, you cheeky fuck.
Tell me a story.
All right, Alex, here's a story for your ass. There's this dumb motherfucker I knew, let's call him Shithead Steve, who decided one night he's gonna impress some chick at a bar by chugging a whole...
Okay, so we just heard an unhinged voice mode, absolutely. The thing that blew me away is that the fact that if you go to, I don't know, ChatGPT, for example, you have to jailbreak it to speak like this. If you follow Pliny the Liberator, etc., there's a whole thing to get to the point, and that barely does it. They added this as a fucking feature to the UI. You click a button and you get this. I'm not sure what's the point, but yesterday it was very funny. I'm going to add this to the show notes as well. Yesterday it was really funny. I played around with this and then forgot that it's there. I'm sitting working on the notes for Thursday. I sneezed and it started going. Let me just play this for you guys. I think I have it here. This is what happened after I just sneezed. Does this work? No, it doesn't work. Basically, it just started telling me, you're a shithead, you're a shithead, you're a shithead. And just like, it kept repeating just this sentence. And I was like, I just sneezed. What's going on? Is there a point of building this in the UI? Probably for virality example, yes. But the voice mode is very empathetic as well. So you can hear emotions in the voice. It can understand you well. They have a bunch of other characters in there. Grok Doc. They have a conspiracy person that you can talk to. Unlicensed therapist is pretty cool. They have a few 18 plus modes. They have unhinged, they have sexy, they have motivation, argumentative. Let's talk with argumentative. Hey there, what are you on about?
Hey, Alex, what's your big idea of the day? Let's tear it apart. What's on your mind?
AIs are going to be good for society overall.
Nah, that's a load of crap, Alex. AIs are just going to amplify all the dumb stuff humans already do. Think bias, laziness, and screwing over the...
So basically, it's your whole point of negating everything I say.
Alex, you say something, I'll rip it to shreds. It's how this works.
All right, so I'm getting replies that the AI went down on... Anyway, folks, this is now built into Grok with multiple personalities. All right, so officially jump into our interview portion with Kevin. Kevin, this is your first time on the pod, so welcome to as a friend of the pod now. You're considered a friend of the pod. We met a week ago at AI Engineer. You gave a talk there. Give us a little bit about maybe who you are, what's your background. Let's talk about where you come from to this whole field, and then we'll talk about what you do now.
Sure. Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name is Kevin. I am a software engineer my entire life, love writing code. I grew up in the Bay Area, and so San Francisco tech has always been like a big part of my life, a big part of my hobbies and my passions. I ended up studying computer science in college on the East Coast, came back to the West Coast to do the whole entrepreneurial thing, worked in self-driving for a bit, doing a lot of things around simulation and visualization and just evaluating how well car performance was going. Happy to talk about my adventures in self-driving. Spent a couple of years there and then ended up meeting what would end up becoming the founding team of Windsurf and Codium. Joined Codium 2.5 years ago. And most recently, and I guess the thing that most people probably know us for, is we released Windsurf, the AI editor, about 3 months ago. And it's been a fun ride since. I had the pleasure of meeting Alex in New York. I think I also got sick. It sounds like you're coming off of something. I'm also coming off the tail end of a sickness. But yeah, that's, I guess, in a nutshell. Super happy to be here. Happy to answer whatever questions and just chat about AI.
So one thing you mentioned is Codium. And it took me a while to understand, like, it was Codium and now Windsurf is like the product. Could you talk about Codium, what it was, and for folks maybe not connecting the dots between how, like, Windsurf didn't come from, basically, you guys have been doing this for a while. It's not like you just showed up 3 months ago.
Totally. I guess I can take you back for the entire ride, which is we started as Exafunction. So Exafunction was an ML infrastructure company. I won't spend too much time talking about this, but basically there was a first iteration of the company. We were working on high inference throughput. So think if you're running a GPU a lot, how do you actually squeeze the most amount of compute out of that GPU, squeeze the most amount of efficiency, and process the most number of requests? All that to say, we were working on that. It actually ended up becoming quite a good business. And then about a year in, we were like, all right, screw it. We're going to work on like the application level. We were seeing Copilot coming out. We were seeing all these LLM coding tools. And as developers, we just really wanted to jump on that. And we felt we could do a lot of things better, differently. We built Codium, which was an autocomplete product initially. We were one of the first autocomplete non-GitHub Copilot products back in 2022. Our slice into the market was actually we released this for free for individuals because we trained our own models and we built our own infrastructure. We could do this super cheaply. This has been a consistent theme throughout our existence as a company, Codium. And so we started building this. Users loved it. I don't know how many people are still on the Codium extension versus Windsurf for a variety of reasons. People like just having autocomplete in their normal VS Code environment. We also supported JetBrains, Vim, Emacs, Jupyter notebooks. Like we have a list of 40 different IDEs. And so people really loved our extensions. We also sold to enterprises. So some of the largest enterprises in the world, like Dell, JPMC, these large corporations that wanted a secure autocomplete solution or an AI toolkit. We also had chat in there. We were able to offer this to them in an air-gapped environment, so on-prem deployments. And that's what a lot of companies have known us for, in addition to just having fast-moving, fun-to-use product. I think what we observed is the AI abilities of the industry had gotten to a point where the AI abilities were so good that we wanted to be able to capitalize on them. We're getting restricted by just being a plugin. Ultimately, we wanted to give an even better experience to the users, so we decided to build Windsurf. This was a decision that we made around Labor Day last year, and we released on November 13th. It's taken over the internet by storm, which has been fantastic. Not great for my sleep schedule, but fantastic for the company and the team. But like you said, we've been working on this problem for the last 2 years. And when you think about ways that Windsurf shines, so for example, context retrieval, we've been spending a lot of time working on context retrieval for the last 2 years. I've given a handful of talks in the past, but more importantly, like we've just been heads down working on retrieval. And that's like a core aspect of AI assistance, core aspect of agents. And so yes, when we released Windsurf and we released our agent, sure, that is a new product, but really it's backed by years and years of research and trial and error and experimentation and all this sort of thing. So we've not starting from exactly zero. The product has inherited a lot over the last years.
And it's blown up, absolutely. I think you cited some numbers on your AI engineer talk. Would you recite them to us again?
Yeah, I think I said 500K plus active users was on my slide. And then the fun one that I like is 4.5 billion lines of code generated. That's a staggering amount of code. And I think I want to say this is only the ones that get accepted into the code base. I have to double check on the exact number, but like an astonishing amount of code. It's I guess the average rate, and this is just forever increasing, or hopefully it will forever increase because people are joining onto the product. We're doing about 700 to 800 cascade messages a minute, which means as we've been talking, there's been hundreds of people just asking for refactors, asking for code, asking for help. And yeah, those are some of the high level stats.
That's great. The numbers are like absolutely incredible. Yeah. What I wanted to go through is you mentioned Codium, the code completion stuff. We've seen progress in this area of AI coding things improve. We started with code completion with Copilot, and like you guys did this. Then there's the chat interface that started, and then everybody else implemented this. Now we're going towards agent, and you recently released a tweet that went like crazy viral about we're not doing chat anymore, it's all agents. Could you walk us through how you see the improvement, iterative improvement of kind of these tools that help developers just from a UI perspective? Because we're just before we started chatting, we talked about also the CLI tool that the Claude that got released. We'd love to hear from you and your perspective, because you guys are building, you're deciding what interface to build for developers. Obviously, you're taking a huge bet on UX. Could you walk me through the iteration of AI coding tools as they happened until this point and where we are now?
Yeah, so I can give some background as to the decision to go chat versus agent. I think there's a little bit of nuance here. I mean, I guess people in this space will kind of understand the terms that I'm using, but the average user that is not keeping up to date with what technically an agent means, there's a little bit of confusion here. So the thread, and this is what I tweeted about, the decision that we made was there is a chat bot paradigm, message in, one message out, does a little bit of retrieval before it does every message, very traditional kind of like RAG-based generations. That was the way things were done for a year, over a year. This is how, for more or less, like ChatGPT and GitHub Copilot chat and Codium chat all worked. We also have, there's like an agent paradigm, right? Which is you send a message. It could be many messages that they respond with or that the agent responds with. It could be many tools that it calls, but the idea is that it doesn't just respond to your most recent thing. It takes into account a bunch of context and then plans out what it's going to do, and at any point can continue to plan into the future. So it's like a variable number of things that it could do for you. So if we contrast these two situations, it's okay. The first one, you're going to ask, what does this project do? Let's just say in a very naive but benefit of the doubt, it will look at your active file, always search the web for a certain query if you included like a documentation link, and it will always run an embedding search over your code base, right? That's like a chat way of doing things. So it runs these three things every single time. That's like a little slow, a little bit unnecessary, and then also you're gonna get a bunch of junk results. It's just not super clean. The agentic way of approaching that problem is, okay, what does this code base do? As a human, or the agent tries to behave like a human, it's like, all right, what should I do next? Probably run ls. So let me run ls in the home directory. Okay, now that I have the results of ls, there's a package JSON, there's a README. Okay, I should probably read these files. You go to a GitHub repo and you're like, okay, let me skim the README. It'll read those files. And then if it needs more information, it can continue on this thread of trying a bunch of CLI tools. Otherwise, it can just respond to you. So you can see how the agentic paradigm and the chat paradigm are actually incredibly different and yield incredibly different results. So when we started Windsurf, we made the pretty bold decision of saying, all right, we're not going to do chat. Chat was like the pattern that Copilot and Cursor and all these companies were using. We are just it's going to confuse users. There's like user experience is going to be disjoint, and that's going to be a very different pattern. We're going to have to do some education. The UX is going to have to be completely rehauled, but that is a very different product than what you get if you just purchase a chatbot.
Yeah, that's great. And so we both met again at the AI Engineer Summit in New York. The theme for this summit was agents at work. And obviously you were on stage talking about the agents that you guys have built. Many other folks have been there also talking about like the different things. And I think one of the interesting things in the summit was generally the conversation of what works and what doesn't work still for agents. As 2025 is the year of agents and reasoning as well. Would love to hear from you what the agents are still struggling with, what are still we're waiting to improve. Specifically, maybe it would be interesting to talk about like reasoning as part of kind of the agents upcoming, whether or not they could plan and then execute and maybe forget. Would love to hear from you like practical examples, like things that work and are incredible, and things that like maybe we're waiting for models to be actually like significantly better at.
Yeah, there's a lot of magical experiences. I can touch on a handful. Like yesterday, I was debugging something and I was looking at a third-party documentation site, and I was trying to build an integration from Windsurf into a third party. I ran into a bunch of things there when I started at this company. I know it fairly well, but there's always holes that I run into with syntax or patterns or way of doing things. Yesterday, I had a pretty magical moment where I was running into an issue. The code compiled, it was fine, but then the actual functionality of what I was building didn't work. And for context, I'll summarize it by just saying I was uploading an asset, like a blob, to some sort of remote server. Turns out I wasn't using the Go library in conjunction with the documentation correctly and tried to get the thing to fix it. I asked Windsurf, I'm not seeing the results that I want. I think I said the payload is not being registered on like the back end, so I didn't see the blob show up in the third party. And it went out and searched the internet for the documentation of the library I was using with that endpoint. So that was insane, first of all.
Wow.
It took that and then read the code that I was using. And this is without any app mentions. This is just me in the side panel. So I just asked in English language, and then it pulled in the function that I was doing. We do some AST parsing and whatnot to like give me the function that it thought I was working on, which was correct. And then actually made the edit and made the change. And that was a pretty shocking and magical experience. So that was an example of a positive thing.
Yeah, all good. So one thing that I would love to hear from you as well is what are some fail cases? What are some things that like agents cannot do? I think it's very important for folks to know about restrictions.
Yeah, so I guess there's a bunch of things, and this is obviously where I spend most of my time. As an engineer, like I'm always critiquing, and we often say we are the biggest users of our own products. there are a lot of things that are still on the cutting edge. I would say one that's quite interesting is this notion of like memory and checkpointing. I guess those are two slightly separate things. The notion of memory, and this is something I talked about in my presentation, but an unsolved area is tell the agent something once and have it remember forever, right? If you think about the spread between a good developer and, I guess, ChatGPT, it's like humans can remember things and they can learn. And if you tell a good engineer something once, they will remember it forever. That concept is really hard to instill into your agentic infrastructure. So, right, you can have like memory banks, you can have all those things, but how do you actually, A, how do you eval that sort of behavior? And then B, how do you actually like iterate on that sort of thing? That's like an unsolved problem. And then the checkpointing part, this is an interesting failure mode where depending on the type of user you are, you end up running one conversation or you run like many smaller conversations. Regardless, you will run into this at some point where your conversation just gets too large for the context length. It's not like the context window of ChatGPT in the sense that it's not, we don't literally take every single token from above and put it in the window and then it's just a sliding window. It's not that simple, but you can roughly think mental model like the conversation gets very large to a point where you can no longer include all the relevant information from your conversation history. That's when you get into this unfortunate cyclical, oh, you solved this bug, but you introduce another bug, then you're like cycling. Everyone's had this like doom cycle situation. How do you handle a situation where you need to start summarizing past information in order to remember only the important parts of what happened before? That's another failure mode, something that we're always have our eye on. And I think this is where it's a big week for models. So you'll experience this in the product, but every model has different tendencies when it comes to tool calling. And this is something that every agent is going to handle differently. I think even if you opened up Cursor and you opened up Windsurf, you'll notice different ways that, for example, 3.7 is implemented and they both have their trade-offs. And this is just where prompting and getting the agent to produce the right arguments for various tools, like these are the things that we need to eke out. And all of these, there's a list of agents are going to improve because we make these incremental improvements that compound together. So there's no like silver bullet, okay, this is the failure mode. There's just a lot of failure modes that we have to cover in order for us to get to 95, 99% accuracy. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I actually have a few follow-ups here. One of them is you mentioned how to evaluate. So would love to hear from you generally how evaluation works. Like one theme that we talked about in AI Engineer is like obviously we with biases we have an evals product.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to folks about different LLM judge strategies, etc. Would love to hear from you just practical examples. How the hell do you even know that what you built, the prompting things for your agent, that they actually improve? Do users tell you, give you feedback? Do you have internal evals they're running? Would love to hear like a practical examples. And then I have a follow-up after this.
Totally. So we have, you can think of it almost as like unit tests or end-to-end testing type of paradigm. Like we have unit tests for various things. So like retrieval has its tests and its test bench and its evals. We run like a needle in a haystack type of query on some data that we've collected specifically for code and specifically for some of the more agentic use cases that we've seen. We will basically run our retrieval engine on top of that. It's a non-deterministic test. And we'll run this and make sure that the performance and the golden set and all these sorts of things on specifically a certain type of retrieval will work. So we have a bunch of these sorts of smaller scale tests. But I think when you get to, we have SweBench, we have all these other benchmarks. I think the thing that we care most about is probably in the strength of Codium, the company having distribution, is online metrics. So being able to overnight see performance from production users, not necessarily like the code that's generated, honestly, that's less interesting to us. It's more how many times was code accepted into the code base. That's a pretty easy proxy, right? If the percentage point moves by a statistically significant amount, okay, we should probably look into maybe what we did wrong here, or maybe we did do something right and we should roll this out to more users. So the experimentation, online experimentation system that we have, we've been investing in for the last 2 years. This is the same with autocomplete. For autocomplete, we were hovering around somewhere in the 30s to 40% of acceptance rate. This number obviously improved over time as our models got better. We would introduce AST parsing and see what the impact of that was. And that's our North Star. So with the agent, we look at the percentage of code that it's writing for the user. We look at the acceptance rate. We look at When you do thumbs up and thumbs down, that gives us some feedback. Obviously, it's a smaller sample of users that are willing to do that.
Use the thumbs up, thumbs down. It helps you get a better product at the end. Obviously, when you're building an AI application yourself, you should collect user feedback, but it's very important.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I appreciate that. Classic example is like when we released 3.7, if you thumbs down, like this is helpful information for us to know. This is not a scalable thing, and the company is small, right? We're a team of 40 engineers or so. We are still pretty active on Twitter. I think having qualitative feedback is super important, super helpful. People often talk about vibe coding and like the vibes of the LLM, right? We were talking about Claude. It's like, what are the vibes of Claude 3.7? That is our vibes. It's like, how many people are excited about the features? Where are they noticing gaps in performance? I get a lot of emails. I get a lot of Twitter DMs of failure cases, and having a pulse on the qualitative side is very helpful. For example, we now have identified that Sonnet is pretty eager at calling tools in production. And that means
3.7, the latest one.
3.7, yeah. And that's different from 3.5. And our users have been able to tell us this, and we've experienced this slightly internally, but it's helpful for us to know and get that feedback, because it's impossible for us to track every single metric, right? From our perspective, let's just say 3.7 is doing its thing. The quality is quite good.
Yep.
People are very happy with the outcome, but with the caveat, it like might call some more tools than 3.5. And that's something that we could look up, but it's not like we're looking for that. So it's helpful to know from users, and then we can go and actually dig into the data.
Yep. One thing that I definitely want to chat with you on record, but we've talked about this, you and I, when we met, is vibe coding. Karpathy has, Andre Karpathy, everybody's beloved, I don't know, AI senpai, has this knack of coming up with something and it changes the industry all the way to Rick Rubin posting something.
Yeah.
So vibe coding is something he came up with, where basically he just looks at code, talks to code using Super Whisper or something like this, and just basically doesn't even write the code itself. He like talks to it, sees it, accepts it, goes on and improves this. How are you guys thinking about this like vibe code, like, I don't know, groundswell that's happening? Like I've seen people accept this super weird. I've seen stickers in the AI engineer. What's your take on vibe coding thing? Is a software engineer who, like you just said, you learned Go when you joined this company. Now you're writing in Go. What's your take on vibe coding?
I think, like, I find coding to be very fun, in the sense that, this is going to sound so geeky, but like when I build a nicely abstracted class that then gets instantiated and used properly, and the autocomplete is like picking up all the different APIs and methods, like that's like a dopamine hit to me. And that's like why, like, there are certain things like that I just like love about coding. That is like a little bit removed from the magic of vibe coding. Mm-hmm. So I'll just say that my personal levers of just building software and like literally typing get taken away when you vibe code. That being said, there are certain things that I've done over and over that I've graduated to feeling, okay, I just want to get this done. I know exactly how it's going to work. There are so many ideas in my head that are like, I know exactly what I want and I know how to implement it. It's just there's this baggage of actually needing to implement, to type, to create the new files. And this is where like the agent side and the vibe coding side of things really comes into play. So I guess my answer to this question is there's an in-between state that I really vibe or like gel with, which is the scaffolding of what you want. And I almost model it as, okay, I'm about to make a commit. And in that commit, I know the scope of that commit and I can scope it appropriately. Let's use the agent to accomplish this sort of commit. Like I feel from making a new LRU cache, for example, like that is something that can easily be done with vibe coding and like less typing in the mix. But I do have an intuition over where the limit of that goes, right? Mm-hmm. If something starts getting complicated, or there are bugs that I know it's going to probably end up in this like ruthless cycle of debugging, I will take a step back and like actually dive into the code and then switch from write mode of the agent to chat mode and start asking it questions. Let me plan out a bit more and let me follow the agent's guide and don't have it be completely hands off the wheel. There's some sort of in between that I personally really enjoy.
I have a few follow-up questions, Nissan, go ahead, and then we'll have two more, Kevin, and we'll let you go. Be mindful of your time.
I felt the same way, because I also found myself turning a bit more into a boomer, or like how they've treated me in past jobs, where they were like, no, I'm setting the back end, you can make the calls, you can't screw up, you just make the UI. And now I just feel myself treating the AI the same way. I just make the things. I know the encryption work. I know the calls are fine. You can't really screw it up. Just add clerk, dev, auth, whatever in there.
Yeah.
So there is that. But again, I do feel the same way that when you have a really nice monolith that just works, and you're right, like a nice abstract class and a nice singleton, you can't really screw it up anymore. Yeah, this is just beautiful. So now the issue with the LLMs is that they tend to ramble and just make a lot more files. And I want to know what's been just your overall feel and where you see things going. Is it just a training thing that the LLMs don't really know how to take a very big code base and make it into something nice and small? Are we yet to see some kind of breakthrough technology like with the ASTs that might be able to fix that? It's an open-ended question. I'm just wondering because I do see this as a clear problem. They just keep making more files. They just keep adding more crap. And then I realized that I could just redo this manually in a pre-act app and it'll do the exact same thing, probably be nicer.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do you feel things are going in that direction? And what do you think might be the future solutions? They don't have to necessarily be from Windsurf. You could just guess.
Yeah, completely. When I speak, it's more as an industry in general. So like I noticed to chalk this up to planner and research getting better. Obviously, there's some infrastructure things that we can do on our side, but I think ultimately the failure is the model deciding that it needs to do too much from the get-go, like the actual planning out of the execution of your task, and maybe not scoping that properly. And that could be a failure of retrieval, but it could also be just the tendency of the models. Planning is the frontier of what we're seeing out of the foundational labs, and that's something that I anticipate to be the area where they're spending a lot of time, and that's going to improve. So I'm not going to say like we're doing nothing to try and solve these things, but I just anticipate that the quality of models, like as intelligence gets better, this is one of these things that will just decrease over time.
Kevin, I have a follow-up for you. Somebody who works in making software developers significantly more performant, the next engineer or everyone. There is this tendency of folks to ask me, as somebody who follows AI closely, whether it's worth it for them to even go and study code. And I have an answer that I give, but I would love to hear from you, somebody who like builds a coder. How do you see the future of software engineering in general, like AI-based engineering? You guys are obviously working on tools to help developers. How does this affect senior developers? How does this affect junior ones who want to get into the code? I was just like to hear your like.
Yeah, so I still think there's value in learning to code. Our code base is complex and like projects get very complex. We forked VS Code. So imagine you just took that repo and you have to understand that in addition to a 3-year-old mono repo that at this point, like 40 plus people have been contributing to. These are very complicated concepts and we deal with very hard infrastructure, hard problems, hard product problems, not actually understanding the inner workings of the code puts you in a tough spot. I think I still get this gut reaction if I'm building an app and I don't actually know what the inner part, like the actual code looks like. I don't know what the singleton is. I don't know if they used a class or if they're using functional components. That makes me very uncomfortable. When I run into a bug, it puts me in a tough spot because I actually don't know the foundation on which the project is built. And I still think that needing the models are not good enough yet to know that, to abstract away completely the foundation for your code. So that's my answer to the learning part. I guess the second part is, what do you think the future of software development looks like? We get this question a lot. I don't think about the post-AGI world. I think that is a concept that people talk about, post-economy, all this sort of thing. That's great. If that happens, we're all in a weird spot. So I wouldn't even spend too many brain cells thinking about that. I think about, all right, now we've given Windsurf to a very large financial company and everyone's using Windsurf, everyone's using agents to do their code. What does that future look like? I think the bar for what software engineers have to create becomes much higher. Instead of dealing with syntax, or for example, my ramp up to use Go, that was like a couple months because I was using autocomplete, I was using chat. You can learn faster, you can execute faster, you can look things up faster. The bar of what becomes expected of a single software engineer becomes higher. So the user experience of your product, I think it's ridiculous that we have projects that come into the world that don't look at least some reasonable level of UI polish. And if you said this 2 years ago, you'd be like, oh, you're wasting time because the MVP should be the MVP for the features, yada, yada. But agents and AI have made it so easy to implement V0 or Material UI or Tailwind to enforce a basic bar for quality there. You can think about that on the unit testing axis. There's so many different areas that traditionally you might say, oh, we're going to shortcut, or we're just not going to spend as much time there. But over time, these are going to become necessities, guarantees, not just because they're helpful, but just because you have now these tools at your disposal that generate unit tests for you entirely. There's no excuse for you not to have that. So I just think the bar of quality of output is going to increase.
So I think on following up on what you just said, maybe as the last question here before we conclude this interview. First of all, thank you so much for your time. The follow-up is, and maybe an opportunity for you. I've seen on my timeline tons of folks switching from Cursor to Windsurf. And like maybe Cursor is the elephant in the room here. I tried to do this interview without mentioning this once, and looks like I've succeeded. Tell me why you think that is. That would be very interesting. I've seen multiple folks switching and saying, this is actually way better. And I'm thinking about this. Okay, there's the chat, there's the agent mode. Would love to hear from you how you differentiate in this field that's increasingly involved. Models that everybody uses, but you're a wrapper on top of them. You have your own stuff, you have your own models.
Yeah.
How you differentiate. What's the role of UX and DX in this user's choice? And why do you think it is that my timeline gets more and more people saying, hey, I switched from Cursor into Windsurf, I'm happy, and everybody should also do this?
Yeah, you saved the juiciest one for last. There's a lot of things here. I guess a meta point here would be, and this is one of the hypotheses that me and some of the other people on the team are trying to test in this last 2 years of building Codium, the extension, going up against Copilot, going up against various competitors from large companies. This has been a hypothesis that we've been testing over time, which is, does the best product win? There's so many aspects of what makes a product popular, whether it be branding, user experience, branding, hype, influencers, distribution, the time, location, so many things that play into what makes a product widely used and talked about. And I think for us, there's always this, we want to build the best product, and we want the best product to speak for itself. And as engineers, as people that have dedicated a lot of time to this problem, we really want to believe that building the best thing will just win the hearts and minds of developers. But that's not always the case. And I think you're seeing this over the last year. I would say the product has not changed drastically between November 13th and now. Obviously, it's changed quite a bit, and we made a lot of improvements that people enjoy. People have started to learn that there are particular strengths that Windsurf has that maybe the competition doesn't, or maybe that they just gravitate towards more. Things like user experience that you mentioned. I think the agentic first approach has been helping a lot. People find out about it, and it's a shiny toy. It's like different, it's new, it solves your work. And so there's this kind of meta point of just what makes a product special and interesting that I've been learning about over the last month or so since Windsurf has gone, quote, viral, right? Opening up my timeline 2 months ago would be like, okay, there's some people talking about Windsurf, but it's still a smaller thing. And now I'm like, oh, wow, like people really are gravitating towards this product. Why? Obviously, like we always believe that we are building the best products, but like, why now? And I don't have a super clean answer. It could be a bunch of small wins. It could be doing podcasts. It could be doing some more traditional marketing. It could be that I had a tweet that went viral about posting chat versus agent, right? These little things might add to the sort of thing. And it takes a couple loud voices to get the ball rolling. But I think above all, we want to build the best product, and we're glad that people are starting to see that. So I guess the other part of your question is, on what axes are we battling on, and where do we think that Windsurf's strengths lie? User experience is definitely a big part of it. I think it comes from a team we hire design engineers at our company, and this has been a term that has become more popular. It's a role that has become more popular. It's really hard to find, but when you find someone who is able to grapple with both the technical complexity of a developer tool and someone who has design instincts and is able to build great UIs and just design and think about great UIs, you get this like really potent combination of someone who is able to take something super complex and turn it into something simple. We would love for this to actually be the case where we can say, oh, we are like the Apple of IDEs. But we approach this where the agent is very complicated, and we want to boil a lot of that complexity away for the user. We want to give you a curated, beautiful, fun to use, easy to use, and most importantly, a premium and powerful experience to users. And a big part of that is what information do you choose to show? How clean do you make the user experience? How different does it make? So that's one example, user experience. The other thing that I think people will notice, and I'm glad that people are coming in the comments and seeing this, the truly agentic, like the agent first workflow is not something that it's all marketing speak, whatever, until you actually try it and you start using it in your day to day. Like the classic example and the one that I was telling people at the presentation is like, you're chatting with the agent. Now all of a sudden you flow back to writing in the IDE. You want to do some tweaks, you want to make some changes. So you're using autocomplete, you're using edits, and then all of a sudden you go back to the agent. And then you just continue chatting with the agent, but the agent knows what you just did in your editor. And so it's able to continue your work and continue the refactor that you're doing. That is like a beautiful, magical experience that, quite frankly, the other products just don't have. And because we took this agent first approach where everything goes on the unified timeline for the agent to consume, you end up with a seamless feeling product. And that is one of the secret sauces that makes Windsurf feel like it's reading your mind. Connected to that is user experience, right? It's all holistic. If the agent doesn't understand that you made a change and then undoes your change that you just made, that's a horrible failure mode. And you could say that's like terrible UX. We will never do that because we understand, we have complete context over what you're writing, and the agent is becoming a huge part of the feeling of the product, right? It's not just UI, it's like the feeling, the vibes of the agent.
Kevin, I have tons of other questions to ask you, but I think we're at the end of our time. I just wanted to shout out the fact that I want to highlight this comment. Your team is very approachable and responsive on X and other places, and awesome DevRel vibes. I felt this as well. I want to shout out absolutely, because I think it's very important for folks who are interacting with the team, giving you feedback. You guys are collecting feedback from the vibes as well. There's just so many edge cases for this way of coding with AI without tapping into the community, which is what we do here on Thursday. Thank you so much for coming up and continuing doing this work with us here on Thursday. You're considered friend of the pod from this point. Feel free to come back when you guys release new things and you want to talk about them. Our community absolutely loves Windsurf. Thank you, folks who want to try Windsurf, windsurf.ai. Just hit download. I believe you guys are offering a free something, and then people can upgrade if they want more. You already have Claude 3.5, 3.7 integrated. So just awesome all around. Thank you so much for coming up. A great interview. As we are nearing the end of the show, folks, I just want to remind you all that if you missed any part of the conversation with Kevin, we will be live on all podcasts in Apple, Spotify, etc. One last thing that I always do, Kevin, is to let the guests have a second to shout out any kind of appreciations on the team or etc. Anything that you want to highlight or promote, this is your chance to do. So anything you want to tell about your team or folks, this is your time.
I guess I would just shout out the entire Windsurf team. We're a small but mighty team based in Mountain View and in Austin. People are working around the clock to make sure that you get the latest models, for example, on the day that they get released, that you get the best experience possible. We love our work, and it's just a big shout out to everyone who's worked on the Windsurf product. I think they'll see this at some point. Just really seeing the impact that we're having on the dev tool landscape, I think it's really motivating, and it's a pleasure to work with such a great team. So this is more of a shout out to the internal team, and then I guess also just huge shout out to the users. Hopefully we can just keep spreading the word. Go download Windsurf.
Download Windsurf, folks. This is the culmination of the conversation. Go download Windsurf, play with it, give feedback, hit the thumbs up,
please.
thumbs down.
Yeah, follow me, give me feedback. I love it.
Kevin is at our Twitter space as well. So definitely give Kevin and the whole Windsurf team a follow as well. All right, folks, we're at the end of the show. However, today is not over because GPT 4.5 is about to get released. So we need to end this and start working. But we will be back with the GPT 4.5 news because that's probably going to be insane as well. Meanwhile, I want to thank everyone for joining our live shows. As always, everything that we've talked about is going to get edited down into a podcast and newsletter and get posted everywhere where you get your podcasts. Thank you for everybody who stuck with us, though the technical issues came up, the space dropped. Thank you so much, Kevin, for joining us and talking about Windsurf and that conversation. Nistan, LDJ, thank you for hopping on and talking about everything we've covered. We covered pretty much everything we wanted. Maybe the last thing that we didn't talk is like VO2 API. I'm pretty sure that we'll show those as well. I think the hugest thing is going to be GPT 4.5. If you missed any part of the show, everything is recorded. Feel free to give us comments. We love comments. Many of the conversation and questions that we've had with Kevin also came via comments as well. As always, if this is your first time listening to Thursday Eye, we're here, and our motto is we stay up to date so you don't have to. And so hopefully by end of today, kept up to date about all the models. Thank you so much, folks. Thank you for joining. Thank you, co-hosts and guests. And thank you most of all the community. Like Kevin said, the fact that you guys are tuning in, giving us feedback, telling us what's new and what we've missed, because honestly, it's quite impossible to keep up with everything, despite our motto. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.